Hello witches, welcome back to the channel. This is Hectarios, and today we're going to be talking about a urban legend slash folktale that's based on a true story that is local to me. So I'll put the link down below in the description box where you can read this for yourself to see that it's all legit. But basically, I'm just going to read this page to y'all and sort of tell a little bit of the background of how this began. This story consists of a mother and daughter who were accused of witchcraft back in 1682 to 1691. It's really a horrible story when you hear the details. But basically, this mother and daughter were accused of being witches and killed. So, okay, got the page loaded. Let's go ahead and read over this. Different sources throughout the years tell a story of two women, a mother and daughter of French ancestry, that settled in colonial or New Spain on the San Marcos River by the name Gery. According to several accounts, the mother's name was Genevieve Gary and is thought to be the daughter of Roland J. Gery. Okay, this story has so many different layers. That's why I really wanted to share this one, because it's like so many different layers of like mystery and intrigue. So Genevieve was the daughter of Roland J. Gery. He was an explorer and a settler of New France, and he settled with René Robert Cavelier, helping him to establish the coastal fort of St. Louis as a trading post between New France and New Spain. Unfortunately, Fort St. Louis would suffer a similar fate to that of the lost colony of Roanoke of North Carolina. Spanish explorer Alonso de Leon discovered Roland and Genevieve while attempting to locate the fort for the purposes of assessing the French presence, establish trade relations, and discuss any territorial concerns that France and Spain might have regarding the new territory. Although De Leon considered Roland to be insane and unwilling to speak of Fort St. Louis' disappearance, he would later credit Roland as an invaluable guide. To this day, no one knows what happened to the French outpost, only that Roland and his daughter Genevieve survived. So that's very interesting right there. Like the lost colony of Roanoke, we all know the story of that, where the entire colony just vanished. No trace, no bodies. It's like they just disappeared. Everything was like left as it was, like they had just vanished or left in a rush, and nothing, no other information was ever found about it. So something similar happened here with this Fort St. Louis. Everyone just vanished except for Roland and his daughter Genevieve, and they both refused to talk about it or explain anything of what happened. So that's very interesting and curious in my opinion. So Roland and Genevieve traveled with De Leon and his men north on what would become known as the San Antonio Trail, or the Camino Real. The party established an encampment at the headwaters of a river, which was claimed for Spain and then named after the Saint Marcos, or San Marcos. So San Marcos is a town here in Texas. That river runs through it, and it's basically a town settled around the headwaters area. So this is almost like the history of the town itself as well. Although the historic record is not clear on this point, it is believed that De Leon stationed a small company of men to protect the Franciscan monks as well as the Gery family and charged them with preparing the area for further. Okay, guys, this is freaking crazy. So I'm sitting here reading y'all this story about these witches and how they're basically the history, folklore ingrained in the town of San Marcos, and I just got an unknown number call from San Marcos on my phone. Like in the middle of this video, it just cut the video off, so that's why there's going to be a weird jump to this point. But how freaking weird is that? Wow. So actually, I think that's going to end up tying in to my personal part of the story. So let's just continue on and you'll see how that's related to this. Okay, so basically what happened, this De Leon guy, there was a monastery erected in the same location at the headwaters or around that area. And so there was some monks there, and Roland and Genevieve also stayed there to settle the area. De Leon left to continue exploring, but the others stayed behind and basically started to create a settlement. It says that the men that were stationed there were able to repel several raids by Native Americans. And according to the records of the Franciscan monastery, they successfully established a presidio and a mission somewhere on the banks of the San Marcos River's headwaters. There's no mention of the Garys at this time other than a Franciscan record referencing a Christian widower and his daughter living above the waters in the hills. So there's no direct reference to their names, but seeing as the previous records, we know that the Gery family stayed there as well. So this is assumed to be talking about them, Roland and his daughter Genevieve. So they were known to be living in the hills above the headwaters of the river. It was around this time that Genevieve became pregnant with Isabelle, and her father died. Church records do not record a marriage or a cause of death, but they do record the baptism of Isabelle and the burial of Roland. This indicates that Isabelle was born of a Catholic father and therefore not a bastard, but this cannot be accurately confirmed. Many unconfirmed stories surround the issue of Isabelle's paternity. Some say her father was a monk. Others claim he was a native man, while still others insist that Genevieve was raped by a group of De Leon's men. More fantastical claims credit Satan as Isabel's father. It is likely that we will never know who Isabel's true father was. So basically the historical records of the church, because they keep records of baptisms and confirmations and things like that, confirmed that Isabelle was baptized, but there's no marriage certificate between Roland and Genevieve. Not Roland and Genevieve. That was her father. Between her and a soldier or anything, like some of the stories say. There's no marriage record at all. So, but there is another theory that Roland did impregnate his own daughter Genevieve as well. So there's many different theories of who Isabel's father really is, but no one knows for sure because the records don't tell us much information, and there's just too many speculations and rumors about who the father really was. Okay, little is known about the initial settlement that Roland, Genevieve, and Isabelle were a part of. Only one surviving written first-hand account remains. The record that we have of the Garys and their community were recorded secondhand and years later. It is most commonly believed that the mission and outpost eventually disappeared, which is suspect considering Roland and Genevieve were part of the Fort St. Louis, which everyone vanished from, and they refused to talk about it. The most plausible explanation is that the small garrison and mission eventually fell to native raids. As with Isabel's paternity, the fall of the first Spanish settlement of San Marcos is rife with speculation and debate. The official historical view is a matter of some disagreement. The general consensus is that De Leon never left a party at the river, or that if he did, they soon perished at the hands of the native tribes. There is also a dispute regarding the Gary's historical veracity. Most scholars believe them to be entirely fictional, or an amalgam of several historical women throughout San Marcos history. The problem with the amalgam theory is that it tends to ignore or trivialize the church's written account of the Garys. It is highly unlikely that the church would record by name a fictitious account, such as the baptism and all of that. The matter of possible Satan worship would have been considered a vital matter during the Inquisition, when accusations of witchcraft and other heresies were considered with the utmost seriousness and conviction by church authorities. The Catholic Church would not have wasted resources on a matter that they did not consider to be of the utmost importance. This is understood by the fact that the church deemed it necessary to send inquisitors to San Marcos during a time when the church's resources were spread thin throughout New Spain. And the very trip was threatening. Franciscan friar Juan Philip Xavier de Ortiz is credited, I cannot talk this morning, is credited with documenting the execution of the Garys for their sins and subsequent crimes of blasphemy, heresy, witchcraft, and consorting with the devil. The secular charges leveled against the Garys were murder and slandering the Spanish crown. According to de Ortiz's account, the Garys were escorted from their trial to the place of execution and placed on exhibition for the faithful, so that they, the people, may see the fate which awaits the wicked. Holy Mother Church's power, the justice of the honorable secular authorities of His Majesty the King of Spain, and God's never-ending mercy, love, and forgiveness. And that is a direct quote from, the records. De Ortiz described the women's gowns, wearing the robes of the auto de re, which bore the symbols of their sins and subsequent crimes against God. De Ortiz states that the women's composure was only broken once, when Genevieve softly and mournfully apologized to her daughter. All those who witnessed the proceedings interpreted this as a further admission of guilt. Apparently, the Garys were unrepentant, claiming their innocence to the very end. Their pleas of innocence fell upon deaf ears. The Garys were stripped naked and burned alive while hanging. So, very brutal way to be murdered here. I mean, could you imagine that? Just a mother and daughter just not only stripped naked and being accused of all of this and then just hanged, but then set on fire while you're already hanging, choking. That is so brutal and horrible. Their charred, broken remains were not interred on holy ground, and in all likelihood, they were buried in an unmarked grave. So, also like a mass burial, they were just buried together in an unmarked grave. So horrible and disrespectful. Local lore maintains that their burial place is located somewhere around the old Hayes County Jail and the Eddie Durham Museum. Others claim that the Garys' resting place is located near Durham Park, due to the many claimed sightings of the Gary ghost over the years. Okay, guys, so that is the background and the true history of this legend, the Gary Witches of San Marcos. Now we'll go ahead and go to the next section, the earliest recorded Gery folklore, circa 1767 to 1773. Okay. Soon after the trial and execution of the Gerys, stories began to circulate amongst the European and native populations. Many sightings of the women were reported on the banks of the San Marcos River, as well as in the hills and woods surrounding the headwaters. The subsequent Catholic missions that attempted to establish themselves in the area all failed, and area folklore attributes the failures to the Gery curse. The curse is said to be leveled against all those of Spanish ancestry and Catholic faith who attempt to settle the San Marcos area. It is interesting to note that the Spanish never did establish a successful permanent settlement in San Marcos. The first truly successful settlement by non-native peoples were of German, Czech, English, and Scot or Irish descent, and primarily of Protestant faith and not Catholic. Most sightings are from second-hand accounts of native peoples, as documented by the clergy of the subsequent Catholic missions and Spanish settlers. It is not until the founding of Villa de San Marcos de Neve that we began to see claims of direct contact with the Gery witches by Spanish Europeans. Native legends tell, isn't that interesting too as well? So the native people seem to be like the first that encountered these ghostly apparitions of the two women. So I think that's kind of interesting because, you know, the native people obviously were more of like a pagan faith, and they weren't, their psychic abilities and stuff like that, their connection to magic was not cut off. If you think about it, like people of Christian and Catholic and Protestant faiths and all that. So I think that's sort of interesting detail as well. Native legends tell of the spirit of a wailing woman who wanders the woods, lost, searching for her daughter and never finding her. The spirit is believed to be that of Genevieve Gary. She is accredited with the dubious crime of abducting and killing children to assuage the loss of her own daughter. Another native legend describes a woman who, during certain times of the year, can be seen kneeling by the San Marcos River and weeping. It is said that she is the spirit of Isabelle and that she cries for her mother and all lost children. Isabelle is seen as a vengeance spirit. It is claimed that if a parent who has lost a child to murder or by the hand of another summons her on the eve of the day of her appearance by the river, that she will exact revenge upon the guilty party. It is further claimed that Genevieve is kept from Isabelle because of her acts of murderous revenge upon the local children. Isabelle is sworn to avenge children's deaths, and her mother abducts and murders children. This dynamic is said to be the sole contributing factor that keeps the Gery women from moving on to the spirit world or the afterlife. There is a theory that states that if Genevieve were to stop abducting and killing local children, that she would be reunited with her daughter Isabelle, and they can move on. An interesting thing there, they don't mention the day that Isabelle is said to appear by the river. Local people might know what the date is, but it is not written in here, probably to avoid anyone going there and summoning her. Okay, the next folklore associated with this is the haunting of Villa de San Marcos de Neve. This occurred in 1809 through 1812. Villa de San Marcos de Neve is credited as the first European settlement on the San Marcos area. The settlers did establish a permanent presidio, hacienda, and church, and technically were the first secular communal settlement after the previous failed missions attempts and solitary residence of the Garys. San Marcos de Neve was plagued by tragedy from its earliest beginnings. Multiple floods, native attacks, crop blights, illness, and mysterious deaths were recorded firsthand by the settlement's magistrate. Villagers were drawn out by the wailing of a woman somewhere in the hills near the San Marcos River's headwaters. Shortly after hearing the cries, some of the village's children began to disappear. And while there is no reported sightings of a woman, there are reports of seeing the ghosts of lost children, as well as hearing the wailing of a woman. The sightings are most prevalent around what is now known as Wonderworld Cave, and the suspected location of the Garys' ruined cabin located in the hills above the headwaters. Some villagers claimed that the ghosts were sent as a warning, an attempt to drive off the settlers. Other settlers claimed that Satan took the ghost, and that the Wonderworld area, at the time of this, the cave had not been discovered yet. But even back then, they assumed that that area of land where the cave was an entrance to hell. So it was like a hell mouth in the local folklore, even though the cave had not even been discovered yet. So that's very interesting right there as well. One account suggests that the Garys drew their power from the children who disappeared, and that they were sacrificing them to Satan as an act of revenge against God's children for their execution by the church as witches. In any event, it is the Villa de San Marcos de Neve accounts that are the foundational stories from which all other Gary lore appear to come from. Okay, so that's very interesting, because the Garys lived 1682, around that time period, and were murdered. The earliest folklore was in 1767 to 1773. The villa haunting was 1809 to 1812. And now we move on to the next section, the schoolgirls version, circa 1832 to 1847. Helen Susan Henkel was 13 years old when she claimed to have been visited on multiple occasions by the ghosts of both Genevieve and Isabelle. It was well known that Helen's father, Isaac, was a drunkard and violent. The Henkel's house was on 7 acres, which currently encompasses the Inland Aquatic Biology Center at Texas State University, across from Sewell Park. Helen claimed that the first visitation occurred after she had endured a severe beating by her father, and the spirit that visited her later claimed to be Isabelle. Helen said that the subsequent visits were mainly made by Isabelle, but that on at least one occasion, a ghastly apparition appeared to her and asked her if she had seen her daughter. When Helen told the spirit that she had in fact seen Genevieve's daughter, Isabelle, that Genevieve began to wail. The sound of the wailing apparently woke Helen's father, who blamed the noise on Helen, and he beat her mercilessly. Helen interpreted this visit to be the ghost of Genevieve Gary. Helen claimed that the Garys had been wrongly accused and sentenced to death, and that Isabelle would exact revenge if called upon any person who harmed a child. The cost was the soul of the party seeking vengeance that Isabelle reluctantly delivered to the devil. Oddly, Helen's father was found dead some days later in his rocking chair. Witnesses described his face as the face of a man who had been scared to death. Shortly after the event, people began to come to Helen asking her to call upon Isabelle to avenge them. At first, Helen was reluctant, but soon she began summoning Isabelle for a small fee. While most people of the town didn't believe Helen's tale, or in her ability to summon the dead Isabelle, the court ordered her to stop offering her services to bereaved parents and those seeking revenge against other members of the community. Helen officially stopped offering her services to the community, but legend has it that she continued to summon Isabelle secretly for a select clientele. Helen died of consumption in 1847, which put an abrupt end to her business. Ironically, Helen's death became the first and possibly only vampire scare in San Marcos. So like I told y'all, this story has many layers. Guys, I just got another unknown call from San Marcos. This is crazy. I never get unknown calls on my phone. So what the hell is really going on here? This is crazy. But like I was saying, this story has many layers. So we have the lost colony type thing that really started to everything with the Garys. We have them being accused of being witches and murdered and all of that. We have the aspect that now they're seen as spirits of vengeance that haunt the river, sort of similar to La Llorona, and that urban legend. And now we have, in 1832 to 1847, we have this poor, abused girl claiming that the spirits were coming to her. And upon her death, there was a vampire scare, that she was a vampire. So the community exhumed Helen's corpse, which exhibited signs of vampirism. You know, the old legend about that. If you dig up a corpse and it does not look desiccated or putrefied in any way, if the skin still looks fresh, things like that, then they assumed that there was still a spirit trapped in the body that had not left yet, and that the spirit was going out and feeding on other people through causing illness and plague and disease and accidents and things like that. So it doesn't specifically say why they initially thought she was a vampire, but those are the typical reasons if you look up the vampire lore and how it began. So I can only assume that there must have been some other tragedies going on around the village for them to go ahead and maybe even sightings of her spirit for them to go ahead and dig up her grave and check if she was a vampire or not. Apparently, they thought she was, so they decapitated her, dismembered her body, and then interred her in an unmarked grave at a crossroads in the area. So they were not playing with that shit. Helen's version of the Gary's tale is the first known version that claims that the Garys, specifically Isabelle, were wronged and that their subsequent acts were acts of revenge directed at the guilty and the wicked. There's 2 more stories and of folklore listed on this website. Deacon Elder's tale circa 1876 to 1880 and the Johnson hoax in 1932, but it does not tell the story. It just has them listed that there is a story to this, but it doesn't say what the story is. So I have to jump forward to the next tale. Olive Street and San Antonio Street, 1940 to 2009. In 1940, it was reported by a road crew during a routine survey that 2 unmarked graves were found around the area currently occupying the cross street of San Antonio and Olive Street. The crew reported it to the police, who apparently turned it over to the city medical examiner, who then reported it as an archaeological site to the university. But no subsequent research was ever conducted, and the story of the graves became legend. So, this is another just intriguing mystery there. Why would they not have investigated it? Why did they just, basically just ignore it? Throughout the years, reports of a ghastly woman and phantom children in the area of Olive Street and San Antonio Street have circulated the community. A small house on the corner of the 2 streets appears to be the epicenter of the activity. Residents have reported hearing strange sounds and feelings of a general unease. Oddly, there have been no visual sightings on the property by residents or neighbors of the Gery ghost. In 2009, partygoers attending a CD release after party at the corner house for the band Olive Street claimed that two young ladies there began to channel the spirits of both Genevieve and Isabelle. The girls reportedly knew details of the other partygoers' lives that were personal and therefore could not have been known by the girls. After 15 minutes of the visitation by the Gery spirits, the girls collapsed, exhausted. Prior to that evening, neither of the girls had ever heard of the Gery legend, but claimed that the Gerys were interred under the house, and that the women's spirits were angry and restless. One of the women stated that the older of the two spirits was unaware of the other's existence, and that she was in misery, beset by the fact that she could not find her daughter. The Olive Street burial claim contradicts most of the commonly held beliefs as to the location of the Gerys' remains, which is at near the old Hays County Jail and the Eddie Durham Museum. So we have, two different unmarked grave stories. However, they said that they dug up Helen because of the vampire scare, dismembered her, and buried her in an unmarked grave. So these actually could be two locations of the unmarked graves. One could just be Helen, and the other could be the Gery women. The San Marcos Treatment Center. This is the next story. 1945 to present. There is a persistent rumor dating back as early as 1956 that claims that the current grounds of the San Marcos Treatment Center sit on an older mental health facility, the San Marcos State Hospital. The story says that the state was running out of room at its Austin and San Antonio hospitals and needed a new hospital to house the burgeoning patient population. San Marcos was picked because it lay roughly equidistant between San Antonio and Austin, making patient transfer to the new asylum easier and safer than patient transfer to one of the state's East or West Texas facilities. According to legend, the state broke ground in 1923, and in 1925 the San Marcos State Hospital began accepting patients. The hospital primarily held persons who suffered from mood disorders and some personality disorders, as well as adjudicated juveniles. The hospital was closed in 1982 due to budget cuts, and the property fell into the hands of the city, which along with the San Marcos School District used the old main hospital complex for storage. The problem with the veracity of this story is simple and glaring. The San Marcos Treatment Center has occupied its current location since 1940, and there are no official first-hand records of the state ever commissioning a mental health facility construction in San Marcos, or Hays County for that matter. While the San Marcos State Hospital story may be a complete fiction, the reports by the San Marcos Treatment Center's clients and staff of a phantom/ghost house and repeated sightings throughout the years of the Gery ghost, as well as spectral children, are well documented. The first known ghost reports came from patients in the newly opened alcohol treatment unit in 1945. Staff initially dismissed the sightings as a product of alcohol withdrawal, common visual and auditory hallucinations caused by delirium from the withdrawals. Soon the staff began to experience the same phenomenon, though, which was initially explained as a shared hallucination between the care staff and the clients. This all changed in 1947 when a psychiatrist by the name of Andrew Myers purchased a Brush BR-401 reel-to-reel tape recorder, and he began taping his sessions. Dr. Myers began to notice a strange background noise on his recordings, which sounded melodic in nature, which is a quote from him. An orderly named Ray William Cunningham, aka Ray Willie, attended Southwest Texas State Teachers College as a music education major. Ray listened to the tapes at the behest of Dr. Meyer and with the help of his music history professor, Dr. Miller, identified the background noise as a French folk song of the 1600s, Un Flambeau, Jeannette, Isabelle. I don't know if I'm saying that properly. It's supposed to be French. Subsequent examination of the recordings in the mid-60s verified the sound as that of a human female humming or possibly singing. So how creepy is that? This was just playing in the background of his recordings of his like psychiatric recordings with his patients. And he would be hearing this playing in the background, and there was no source for it. And it just happened to be this French song that has the names Jeannette, Isabelle in the title. So if you go and listen to that song, I looked it up after reading this legend. You can find versions of the song on YouTube, or you can just look up the lyrics of it. It is in French, but translated to English. It's crazy. But yeah, you should go look that up and read that. Okay, while this story is compelling, it is impossible to verify because no copies of Dr. Meyer's recordings have ever been found, and both Ray William Cunningham and Dr. Myers are deceased. Although university records do substantiate that Dr. Miller's employment, they do not provide current contact information, which leads one to conclude that Dr. Miller is also dead. So, you know, the main three people involved in that incident in 1945 are all dead. So, but there has to be someone that heard the story firsthand or something from these people for this legend to have even got out, you know? Okay, so they have another story listed here. These are towns close to San Marcos: Martindale, Maxwell, Reedville, and the Army Air Corps, 1943 to 1965. But this, once again, it's just listing that there is a story here, but it doesn't have the story written on the website. So it's at least letting us know that this has continued throughout the years, because this was 1943 to 1965 that these happened. So we know that it has continued. And the next legend that we have is titled Mother Lupe Anna Ortega's End Times Prophecies, 1951 to 1957. Lupe Ortega was born in El Paso and moved to San Marcos during World War II to be close to her son Juan, who was training to be a pilot at the San Marcos Army Air Corps Base. She lived with her cousin Lapita, who was a native of San Marcos and who worked at the Greyhound bus station as a cashier. Lupe set up shop as a hairdresser, but soon became known as a gifted fortune teller and medium. Lupe maintained that her visions were gifts from the Blessed Mother and that she was sent to San Marcos by the Blessed Virgin to warn and protect its people from the great evil residing there. Lupe and her sister interpreted this as the devil, and later as sin in general. But as the two women became familiar with local legend, they began to suspect something different. In 1951, Lupe claimed that the spirit of Helen Susan Hinkle, who told her that the end of the world was not far off, and that the source would be San Marcos, had visited her. Lupe's subsequent contacts with Helen would later add detail to her original predictions. Lupe claimed that Helen told her that Wonderworld Cave was the antechamber to a hell mouth, and that an earthquake would break the seals and unleash the hordes of hell upon the earth. There has always been speculation about the word seals, since the cave bears no visible signs, sigils, or seals. As to the time of the earthquake and subsequent unleashing of hell on earth, Lupe said that Helen had not been exact with regard to a date and time, but that she believed that it would happen in her or her children's lifetime. Lupe Ortega, as well as her 3 sons and daughter, are all deceased in the present. I really wish there would have been more details on that story, because that's very interesting, but unfortunately that's all that's listed on this site. In the next section, we have associated legends and lore. Ocarina Springs. People have claimed to see the spirits of the Spanish missionaries wandering the grounds of Ocarina Springs and the surrounding area. The sightings are consistent with the descriptions of the Black Robe Society, a reported suborder of Dominicans or Franciscans, depending on the version of the story one chooses to believe. The Wonderworld Hellmouth. The cave, discovered by a local San Marcos man, now known as the Wonderworld Cave, is claimed by some to be an entrance to hell. The claimants state that native lore credits the area with great evil. This is highly unlikely considering that the cave was unearthed in the 1800s. Claimants point to crime statistics which indicate that violent crime activity around the Wonderworld Cave is higher than average, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. So that's very interesting as well. There's just a higher crime rate in that area. And the native people even considered that area evil even before the cave was discovered. So that's very interesting. The Old Main Spectre. Old Main holds the credit as being the first building ever erected by the university. Texas State University currently houses the college radio station, faculty and staff offices, as well as some classrooms in the building, but it was, for many years, the building from which everything college-related occurred. There have been reports of a female ghost presence in the building since the 1920s, but it is unclear if the apparition is related to the Garys in any way. Some versions of the story say that the ghost is that of a girl who committed suicide when she discovered that her fiancé was killed in World War I. Other versions claim that she killed herself because she failed out of school her sophomore year. The only known Gery reference claims that she was murdered by one of the Gery women because she killed her professor's children, whom she was having an affair with, after he broke the relationship off. According to the story, the professor's wife called upon the Garys to exact her revenge, and the girl dropped dead during homecoming in the professor's office at Old Main. So that's very interesting as well. One thing I will note here, just of the geology of the location in San Marcos, the college area seems to be built on the hills surrounding the headwaters of the San Marcos River, so it would make sense if it is haunted as well by the Gery ghosts. There's a reference to Crybaby Cemetery, but there's no story, so I don't know what that's about, but it's in here. The Confederate Ghost Curse. It is said that a CSA sergeant by the name of Eli James Olis became obsessed with the Gery legend while serving in San Marcos during the U.S. Civil War. The alleged story's source material is Eli's journal. It has never been located, nor has its existence ever been verified, but the lore states that Eli engaged in expeditions trying to locate the Garys' ruined cabin and their resting place. It is said that Eli found the cabin's location, which is reported to be somewhere on the grounds of the San Marcos treatment facility. Eli never found the Garys' resting place, and local residents claim that they see him wandering about San Marcos, still looking for the Garys' burial site. So that's interesting as well. He at least found their ruined cabin, and it's on the present grounds of the San Marcos treatment facility. The Thompson Island Terror. Now, this is one that I have personally seen in San Marcos myself. I have seen the spirit of a soldier, which is this legend. During the Civil War, a squad of and I didn't even know this legend when I seen it. So it's very interesting too. The Thompson Island Terror. During the Civil War, a squad of Confederate soldiers were dispatched from their encampment to Thompson Island to investigate the wailing, moaning, and distressful cries of a phantom woman. The legend states that when the squad arrived, a small house on the island was in flames. The occupants burned to death, and a ghost woman looking on in approval. As the men approached, they could see that she was horribly disfigured. She was reported to be burned over most of the body. Her neck was broken, and her complexion gray and gaunt. She reportedly vanished in the dawn mist, much to the surprise of the 7 men who claimed to have witnessed this event. Residents have claimed to hear the cries of the family of the burned house and have seen the Gery women on the island for generations. So, Thompson Island is a little island where the San Marcos River splits into and sort of goes around this area of land. It's like a park now, pretty much. But I have been driving through there and I've seen a soldier walking on the side of the road, and many people report seeing that as well. There's another legend. There's another couple of legends referenced here: Hidden Grave and to the however you say that, Party's Horror. But there's no story to those. It just has them listed. And the final one we have here. Actually, there's another unlisted or listed story, but no content. Negromanto Venator Daemonium and Cuneiform in a Texas Cave. So that's interesting. There's no story, but I'm kind of assuming that they're talking about the Wonderworld Cave. Like maybe they found some kind of cuneiform writing in there or something. So maybe they eventually did find some kind of seals or something inside that cave. And to the present day, this the Wonderworld Cave is somewhere you can go. You have to like pay to get in there, but you can take a tour of the cave and stuff. Inside the cave, there's a huge well that goes down to like a underwater river and stuff. I like did heavy research on this after reading all these legends and stuff, but it's very interesting that there's like an entire underwater network of that cave continuing on. So it very well could be some other things undiscovered down in the deeper parts of the cave, but it's just all filled up with water, so no one's investigated it. Okay. The next story that we have is called The Little Ones. San Marcos and the surrounding area have always been home to ghost lore involving children. Most ghost stories involving children are generally lumped together and categorized under one umbrella term, the little ones. More specifically, the little ones are considered to be souls of children that Genevieve has taken as an act of vengeance upon the townspeople. If this is true, it puts her at odds with her daughter Isabelle, who is claimed to be a vengeful spirit who acts as an arbiter for those who have had their children taken from them. The children are sometimes seen or heard with Genevieve, but oftentimes are seen alone. Most encounters occurred around the headwaters of the San Marcos River, the hills overlooking the river, and near Wonderworld Cave. It has been noted that seeing a little one always predicts the disappearance or death of a child. So when people see these, it's almost like a warning that another child's going to either disappear or die soon thereafter. So that is all for the legends and folklore with this whole story. Now I will start to tell you all my personal experience with this, other than what I've already said. The Confederate soldier that I have seen before on Thompson Island, or driving through it at night. So this is just a very interesting thing, and it's almost like every folklore in San Marcos all ties back to the Gery witches. So it's very interesting to me to see, that correlation, that it all goes back to that in the end. And like I said, it has so many layers here. It's like, there's just so many different things, but it's all tied back to these two women, mother and daughter, Genevieve and Isabelle. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, when I first learned about this, I can't even really remember how I came about this knowledge. I think I was researching seeing that Confederate soldier spirit, because I was living in San Marcos for a few months back in winter between 2017 and 2018. So while I was there is when I seen the spirit. And I think I've seen that spirit more than once. Like, I think I recall when I was younger, just visiting San Marcos, that I had seen it before. But I saw it again recently. Like I said, in the winter between 2017 to 2018 while I was living there for a few months. So I was researching that, and I came across this page and read all of this folklore and stuff. And I was just like, shook by how much stuff is going on here. So I debated whether I was going to share this part here and not share it in my private group, but I'm going to go ahead and share the story here because I just think it's fascinating, and why not make it personal to just bring this legend home, you know? So basically, after discovering all of this, in like January of 2018, I devised a ritual to sort of get in contact with the Gery witches. Now, you know how folklore is. It is based on, you know, the greater society's perception of these things. Like I've talked about before on my channel many times, hauntings come across terrifying and scary because we don't understand what's going on. But really, the ghost is actually, more than likely, most of the time, is actually reaching out for help. But they're very limited in how they appear and the way that they can communicate to you. So they may appear as a ghastly, hideous being because that's how they died. But that does not mean they're evil, okay? They might knock things down and break things in your house, but that doesn't mean they're evil. It just means that they're trying to reach out, and that's all they can do. So with that said, and with that knowledge, I think that a lot of this folklore could be, you know, a situation like that. These Gery witches could actually just be reaching out for help. Not necessarily the aspect where it talks about them being spirits of vengeance, killing people, but you know, as far as them communicating with Helen Hinkle, you know, there was nothing really nefarious about that other than, and I really don't consider it nefarious that people would summon Isabelle to get justice on someone who murdered their child. I think that that is okay, in my opinion. I would not necessarily view that as evil. But, you know, coming to her because she was also an abused child, beaten by her drunken father all the time. And then the spirits of the witches coming to those two girls at the CD release party and just giving like psychic readings almost. You know, that's not really nefarious either. So I think that a lot of the folklore could just be like rumor and just to make it scary, or taking something and blowing it out of proportion to like escalate the evil of it. That's just how I tend to view these things when society gets a hold of a supernatural event and turns it into a ghost story. So, you know, there's no proof that these women were actually witches. It was just something that happened in the 1600s and they were just murdered because of it. So, I don't know, something just haunted me and stuck with me about reading their story, just the history part, not even the folklore, just the history of the Gery women, how they were stripped naked, hung, and burned alive. You know, that just like haunted me and stuck with me. Like I could not get that out of my mind. And I wanted to reach out to these spirits. So in January 2018, when the blood moon was occurring, I devised a ritual to connect with them. So I'm not going to get into the details of the ritual. Maybe that's what I'll share in my private group. As far as the actual spell and ritual that I cast and the process. But here, just suffice to say, I cast a ritual to connect with these spirits. And sort of to offer them healing in a way, you know, to be in communion with me and my sympathy for their plight and suffering, and wanting to help them connect with each other, because apparently, according to these legends, they cannot get in contact with each other. They're permanently separated. And also to have them almost sort of help me as familiar spirits as well. So that was my intention with my blood moon ritual I did in 2018. Now, after I did that ritual, I did experience some different things. And one of the main things, one of the main keys and intention, these candles I have burning on my altar are going crazy right now. They have been crackling and popping throughout these videos. I don't know if you have heard it, but they've been doing it, and now this flame on this side is like jumping really tall. And they're both really, really tall flames, as it is. They're like 3 inches tall each. So I don't know what's going on with that, but this is very interesting. Sorry, I got sidetracked, but that just caught my attention. Basically, though, one of the key intentions of my ritual was to develop my abilities as a physical medium through the help of the Gery witches, because they're said to be able to do physical phenomenon and stuff like that. So shortly after I did that ritual, I did begin to experience certain things. Like there was a time I was just here at my house, just like watching something on Netflix or something, and I started to get this severe pain in the back of my neck, and like just out of nowhere I just started getting this really severe pain in the back of my neck. It felt like someone was like squeezing the back of my neck like this really hard, and it just lasted for hours and hours and hours. Just continued on, and I was like, what is going on here? Like I didn't understand what it was, and then I started to get an inkling that maybe this was some sort of psychic event, a physical mediumship. But I had nothing. I was just like stuck with that information and had to just go on I just like moved on and was like, whatever, I don't know what this is. I know what I think it is, but there's nothing to correlate it to. So I just let it go. So later on, like the next day or a couple days later, I was hanging out with my little brother, and he told me that the night before he was at a friend's house, and they were talking, and somehow or another it got brought up about this girl's past and some abuses that she'd gone through with her, I think it was her uncle. He had sexually abused her, and I really hate to share this girl's personal details, but I sort of have to for the sake of the story. But of course, I won't be sharing her name or anything. But basically, her uncle would sexually abuse her and molest her, and he would... I'm sorry, this is going to be a trigger warning as well. Please don't watch this if you don't want to. But he would bite her on her inner thighs during the sexual abuse and tell her, you know, you're mine and things like that. Very grotesque and disturbing things that were going on. She said as well that he would bite her and squeeze on the back of her neck really hard during these events as well. And this all happened when she was a kid. After a few years, that uncle ended up getting very sick and dying. But while he was on his deathbed, he told her that he will never leave her and that she will always be his before he died. Now, she said that ever since then, she has been haunted by this uncle, that he has been always like a dark presence looming in her life. Every time that she gets into a relationship, he comes and sort of like starts attacking her and causing chaos in the relationship as well. And I think that the whole reason she started telling my little brother this was because it was happening again at the time. She was waking up with bite marks on her thighs and with the pain in her neck. And so my brother knows that I'm a witch and all of that, and work with spirits and everything and do cleansing and stuff like that. So he brought up to her, like, you know, my brother's a witch. He might be able to help you with this and things like that. During the night that they were discussing this. So while that was all taking place, that is when I was experiencing that pain on my neck that was unexplained. And I found out, like I said, the next day or a couple days later when I was hanging out with my little brother, he told me about all this. But he didn't tell me right away. I started telling him about that experience and how I thought it was connected to the spell work I did with the Gery witches and developing the physical mediumship. And I was like, yeah, I was getting that pain on my neck out of nowhere. And he was like shook, because then he started telling me this and in the conversation that he had had with that girl. So that was very interesting. And I took that as a sign, like, you know, maybe the Gery witches want me to help this girl. And now my ceiling just popped really loud. I don't know if y'all heard that. But I was never able to do it because I never got a chance to meet that girl or anything, still to this day, unfortunately. So, you know, hopefully whatever she's going through came to an end. I pray. But yeah, that is what happened with that. And that's sort of like one personal aspect of this. Now, I did continue to have, and I still to this day continue to have, that sort of physical mediumship aspect to my powers now, where I will feel sensations in my body, phantom pains and things like that. And I know that that's connected to some sort of mediumship phenomenon that's going on. I don't always know what it is, but sometimes I do get confirmation of what it is and take action because of it. But that's just something I wanted to share as well with this. Now, I have not had any contact with the Gery witches for quite some time. Like I said, I cast the spell in January 2018. Sort of had those physical phenomena happen over the course of 2018. Now we're into 2019, and I have not really had much contact with those spirits or anything like that since I cast the spell. However, recently, like within the last few months, they have been on my mind. I have been wanting to do this video and revisit the story, but I did sort of put it off till October, because it is sort of like a haunted story type thing. So I wanted to just like wait to share it now as a sort of witchy Halloween video. But it has been on my mind for the past few months, like wanting to talk about them, wanting to go out to San Marcos again and get in contact with these spirits again and things like that. It has heavily been on my mind. Okay, so this is where things start to get really interesting again with this. Recently, my mom and my sister were hanging out in her room and just, sort of talking, just having a normal time, just chatting and stuff. And out of nowhere, my mom's closet door just busted open. Now, at first, she thought maybe that her cat was in there because he does go in her closet sometimes. But, I was asking her, was the door shut all the way? Because that's still, like, weird. Like, he cannot open the door by turning the doorknob and stuff like that. But still, at first, they're both like, first of all, they jumped because obviously the door just busted open out of nowhere. Then they were like looking at each other, and then they were like, okay, well, maybe the cat is in there. So they opened the closet all the way. My sister was in there, sort of feeling around in the dark, looking for him, to like the back corner of the closet. And at the same time, while that was happening, my mom opened up her bedroom door and called to her cat, and he was standing there outside of the bedroom. So her bedroom door was shut. There's no way he was in the room at all. But when she opened the door, he came in, or he was standing there outside the door, like looking at her. So my mom was like, well, he's right here. He's not in the closet. And that shook my sister because she said that while she was feeling around in the darkness, she felt what she thought was him in there. So she said that she slowly just took her hand off of it and walked away out of the closet like, what the hell was that all about? And she didn't look after that. They just closed the closet door. But that was like a weird thing that happened. And right after this occurred, my mom was looking through her phone, and my sister was sort of like seeing the phone screen as well during this. And basically there was some sort of call coming in, or a missed call, where it said Genevieve is calling. But my mom has no one named Genevieve in her contacts. So first of all, how the hell? When someone, that's not in your contacts calls you, it just has a phone number listed with the location, or unknown caller or something. There's not supposed to be a name there. But they both saw where it said Genevieve is calling, or that there was a missed call from Genevieve. And when my mom tried to look back at this missed call, there was nothing. No call log or anything. It was just like, it was only there for that moment, and then it was gone. So that was very interesting, and my mom has no idea about any of this information that I just shared in this whole video. I've never talked about it with her. I never told her the spell I cast or anything. But that is something that happened recently, like about a month ago, I would say. So that was very interesting. And now, during this video that I'm recording, I get 2 missed calls, or 2 incoming calls from San Marcos, from an unknown number. How bizarre is that? And like I said, I never get calls like that. It's only happening while I'm talking about these witches from San Marcos and the folk tales and folklore of San Marcos. That's crazy. I wish I was recording this on my other camera so I could have shown y'all the calls coming in on my phone. But very creepy stuff going on here. And I do feel like I said, I have been, these spirits have been on my mind for like 3 months now. And I'm starting to wonder if they're not reaching out to me, and that's why. With these incoming calls from Genevieve and from San Marcos just now, I'm like wondering, are these spirits calling out to me to come visit them? So with that, I'm going to end this video, and hopefully I will get to San Marcos soon and do some updates on this as well. So, like I said, I will leave the link below to this website where you can read all of this yourself and see that it's legit. And I will try to link to that song, Un Flambeau, Jeannette, Isabelle, so you all can listen to it and just like analyze the lyrics to me, it kind of seems like this would be something maybe Genevieve or Isabelle would hum to themselves as a comfort, seeing as how it says that they are kept permanently apart from each other as spirits. Just with the title and with the lyrics itself, it would make sense to me that this would be like a comforting song, you know, when they're missing each other, that they would just hum it to themselves. And also comforting in the fact that, you know, they may not have even been witches. They may have just been people that were accused of witchcraft and murdered. And this could be something that they would hum as a comfort to their soul, like knowing that they were innocent the whole time. So I just thought I would share that. I'll leave the links below, and leave a comment if you're in the San Marcos area, or if you've ever been there and you've experienced some sort of ghost sighting or anything that correlates to this. Leave the comments below. Share your story. All of this stuff fascinates me, and I know it does y'all as well. So please leave that below. And I look forward to sharing more spooky things before Halloween gets here. And maybe even on Halloween night, I might do a Ouija board session with you all. So that's going to be all for this video. As always, hail to the witches, hail to the Gery witches, hail Hecate, and blessed be.